we're going to talk about the psychology of saving money. You see, many people say they want to save money, but when it comes down to actually doing it, they just can't seem to make it happen. And this is because if you want to change your behavior, you need to understand the psychology behind why you do what you do, right? So in this video, we will go over 5 psychological facts to help you better understand why you have trouble saving money. So here's a quick disclaimer. We are not financial advisors. This content is for educational purposes only. Now let's get into it. Number 1, delayed gratification. Have you ever been really hungry but decided to wait until lunchtime to eat because you didn't want to waste time preparing food and cleaning up after yourself? Or perhaps you have an intense urge to watch another episode of your favorite TV show, but you decide to hold off until later so you don't get caught up in it. Well, these are all examples of delayed gratification. And according to research, delaying gratification is one of the best predictors of financial success. This is because those who practice delayed gratification are able to resist immediate temptations in order to achieve a more significant outcome down the road. In other words, rather than spending your money as soon as you receive it, you choose to save it instead with the goal of achieving something more significant in the future, such as buying a house, paying for your child's education, or retiring early. But how do you improve your ability to delay gratification? Well, one way is to start small by setting short-term goals for yourself that require you to sacrifice some immediate pleasures for a greater reward down the road. For example, if you want to lose weight, set a goal to exercise 3 times a week. If you want to save money, set a goal to cut back on discretionary spending for the next month. By setting and achieving small goals, you will gradually build up your ability to delay gratification, which can eventually lead to bigger achievements. It also helps to remind yourself of the benefits of delaying gratification. When you feel like indulging in a temporary pleasure, take a moment to think about how that might affect you in the future. Will buying that new car make it harder to save for retirement? Will getting caught up in credit card debt make it harder to buy a house? By understanding the long-term consequences of your decisions, you can make better choices that will ultimately lead to greater success. Number 2, mental accounting. Imagine this, you've just received your paycheck and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. You think to yourself, I deserve a nice dinner out to celebrate. And then before you know it, half of your paycheck is gone. Sound familiar? Well, this phenomenon is known as mental accounting, and it happens when we categorize our money based on how we intend to spend it. For example, we might have a separate account for our savings, another for our investments, and yet another for our discretionary spending. The problem with mental accounting is that it can lead us to make irrational financial decisions. For example, because we think of our savings as money that is earmarked for a specific purpose, we might be less likely to dip into it even when it would be a good financial decision to do so. For example, let's say you have $5,000 in your savings account that you've earmarked for a down payment on a car. If you had $10,000 in the bank, you might be able to negotiate a better price for the car. However, because you've already mentally categorized the $5,000 as money for a down payment, you might be less likely to use it for this purpose even though it would make financial sense to do so. Similarly, we might be more likely to spend money from our discretionary account even if we do and need to because we think of it as money that is available for anything. So how can we overcome mental accounting? One way is to become aware of the tendency and its potential pitfalls. Once you realize that you making decisions based on how you categorize your money rather than on the actual numbers, you can start to shift your thinking. Another approach is to adopt a more flexible mindset when it comes to your finances. Instead of thinking of your money as being earmarked for specific purposes, try to see it as a pool of resources that you can use for anything. This might be difficult at first, but with some practice, it can become second nature. Number 3, habits. Have you ever noticed how you tend to gravitate towards certain types of food when you at the grocery store? Or how you always find yourself taking the same route home from work every day? Well, these are all examples of habits. And like it or not, our daily habits have a major impact on our financial well-being. According to research, our habits account for roughly 40% of our daily actions. And while habits can be helpful in many areas of our lives, they can also lead us into financial trouble if we're not careful. For example, let's say you have a habit of eating out every day for lunch. At first glance, this might not seem like a big deal. After all, who doesn't love a good meal out? However, if you do this every single day, it can add up to a lot of money wasted. Over the course of a year, You could be spending thousands of dollars on meals that you could have easily made at home for a fraction of the cost. Fortunately, there are a few simple steps that you can follow to form better financial habits. The first step is to identify the bad habits that are costing you money. This could include anything from impulse buying to not having a budget. Once you've identified your bad habits, the next step is to replace them with good ones. For example, instead of impulse buying clothes every month, make a conscious effort to save up for a specific clothing purchase that you really want. By following these simple steps, you can start to form better financial habits that will help you reach your financial goals. Number 4, emotional triggers. Let's face it, we all have our emotional triggers when it comes to money. Maybe you feel anxious when you think about your student loans, or maybe you feel stressed out when you look at your credit card bill. Whatever your emotional triggers may be, they can have a major impact on your financial well-being. That's because our emotions can cause us to make impulsive decisions that we later come to regret. For example, let's say you're feeling particularly stressed out about your finances, and you decide to take out a payday loan to cover your expenses. In the short term, this might seem like a good idea because it gives you access to the money you need to pay your bills. However, in the long term, this can be a costly mistake because payday loans typically come with very high interest rates. Fortunately, there are a few things that you can do to avoid making impulsive financial decisions driven by your emotions. First, try to identify your emotional triggers when it comes to money. This could involve working with a therapist or counselor to explore your feelings around money. Once you've identified your triggers, the next step is to develop coping mechanisms to deal with them. This might involve taking some deep breaths and counting to 10 before making a major financial decision, or taking some time to relax and distress before tackling your finances. By taking these steps, you can avoid making impulsive decisions that you'll later come to regret. And number 5, loss aversion. Have you ever noticed how much more upset you get when you lose money than when you gain the same amount? Well, this is known as loss aversion, and it's a powerful psychological principle that can have a major impact on your financial decisions. In fact, according to research, it takes roughly 2.5 times the amount of good news to make people feel as good as one piece of bad news makes them feel bad. That means that if you invest $1,000 and gain $500 in profit, you won't feel as good as if you would have lost $500. And this bias can lead us to make irrational financial decisions. For example, let's say you're invested in a stock that has lost 10% of its value. Even if the stock is fundamentally a good investment and the long-term trend is positive, you might be tempted to sell because you don't want to realize the loss. Similarly, you might hold on to a failing investment for too long because you don't want to admit that you made a mistake. Fortunately, there are a few things that you can do to overcome loss aversion and make more rational financial decisions. The first step is to become aware of the bias and how it affects your decision-making. You can do this by reading about loss aversion and taking a quiz to assess your susceptibility to it. The next step is to develop strategies for overcoming loss aversion. This could include setting long-term goals for your investments and sticking to a plan regardless of short-term fluctuations in value. By taking these steps, you can overcome loss aversion and make better financial decisions. And that's it. Those are 5 psychological facts that can help you better understand why you have trouble saving money. While it can be challenging to change our behaviors, understanding the why behind our actions is the first step to changing them. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. If it was, please consider subscribing and liking this video. We would greatly appreciate it. Also, please leave a comment down below. We love reading your comments and responding to them as well. And lastly, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss out on any future videos. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you in the next video.